Okay, this next video is going to look a little bit at the blurring options that are created in Photoshop. Again, some of this blurring can occur naturally with the way you take your pictures. Previously, when using cameras where you're changing aperture and shutter speeds, and if you're using a DSLR camera, you can create a blur based on your aperture settings. So if you're focusing really closely to a subject and there's things in the background, depending on how your focus points are on your smartphone, you might have the whole image clear, or you may have just what's close to your image clear and crisp, or close to your lens clear and crisp, whereas things that here we have in the background, we have some different degrees of blurring. So these leaves here in the foreground are definitely more in focus. Then these start to get a little softer, and then even softer in the background. We can barely tell what this is, but we could maybe distinguish that it must be more leaves, as they're kind of similar in color. So with this image, I'm going to do some blurring. I'm going to kind of just show you some blurring options, and it is a smart filter option. So again, we're going to create, we need to convert for smart filters. So I'm going to go up to the top and choose filter, convert for smart filters, because there's actually some really cool things I can show you with this technique, and you can use any filtering if you use the smart filter. So it's pretty cool. Anyhow, our blurring, we're going to go up to filter, and we have two types of blur. We have blur options here where it'll just, you click on this and you can choose these. Hopefully these are mostly obvious to what they might be. The Gaussian blur is probably, you're kind of like, what the heck is that? But that's just kind of an overall blur, and you can get a little preview in your box. And if you turn up the radius, more blurry, and so on and so forth. So you can use just this blur here and try these different ones. Radial, obviously, kind of. Well, we'll see what that looks like. And then it'll take a second. And then, obviously pretty crazy, huh? So I'm going to go back in my history, which is this area here, and just go back. So those options just come up quickly for you. Now in Creative Cloud, it must have happened in Creative Cloud because I don't remember this the last time I was using Photoshop, which is kind of exciting. But if you go up to, again, filter, and you go to your blur gallery, you can click on any one of these, doesn't really matter. What it's going to do is open up a new box that has all these different options of blurs, and you can be a little bit more specific, and you get a lot of more effects with these. So, field blur, and you can kind of just click on this radio tool here and do it visually this way instead of using the slider bar here. Then they have this light bokeh, which will brighten kind of the sunlight there. Have it kind of bursting out. You can change the color, even the range. Ooh. So, you're doing all sorts of crazy things that you're not able to just do in that regular blur dropdown, so it's kind of nice. I'm just going to reset this. And, iris blur just kind of gives you can kind of change the shape here. It'll just blur certain areas. So tilt shift, I'm sure you have. I think this is an Instagram option you might see, so you might be familiar with this. But it'll blur, outside of the edge there. But what's nice is you can kind of maneuver these around, so you don't have to kind of go with the. And then of course you get the light bokeh here as well. But anyhow, this you can be a little bit more choosy with. You have more choice, and you can be choosy. The path blur is actually kind of tricky, but it takes some time to play with it. What you can do is you can create almost like a motion blur in a direction of of where you want to go. So I'm going to double click here because I want to kind of pull this arrow. So I double click to kind of change my point. They always default to the middle, but you can kind of maneuver them around the way you want. So I kind of want my path blur to go this way, and I can choose different things here, but obviously if I turn up the speed, it's going to make it more blurry. Endpoint speed, these sort of things. Here, this will kind of change a little bit. So you can play around a little bit with this. And here's where it gets a little tricky because obviously you can kind of change the direction of this and make it really kind of crazy. So it's a lot of fun. But if you wanted to create, you know, kind of that look of driving fast in a certain direction or something, you could use your path blur. I'm going to reset that. And your spin blur. I guess you don't have a whole lot of options with that, but again, you can, you know, make it bigger. You can move this around. Just like any of those, you can move them around. So what's nice with this, you know, obviously, hopefully you're noticing with Photoshop versus things you can do on your phone, you can be more specific. Definitely be more specific with your editing, and you can definitely be more choosy. So I'm going to actually cancel this and go back to just the basic blur. And I'm just going to show you a fun little trick you can do with any kind of filtering. So I'm going to turn up my blur here. I'm going to hit OK. And you can see that I have my Smart Filter, my blur. Here's what's cool about the Smart Filter option. I promised I was going to show you this. You will click on these blending options here, double click on those, and you can actually create another effect on top of your filter. So, you know, an overlay, what it does is it kind of mixes with your blur, but then it adds an extra little effect. And all these are different, and it depends on the image and what you've done, and screen is kind of nice. Gives it a nice little fresh look to it. So again, that was just creating a blur and then using what I call the little teeter-totter option here. You can double click on that and open your blending modes, blend options, and it'll blend the change that you did a little bit more to your image. So you'll get different effects with different things, you know, different filters and things that you do. But again, if you do not create a smart filter, you won't be able to do this option. So always remember to do that.